NFL season is halfway over. Are the Chicago Bears a legitimate playoff contender in 2025?
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bears here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. My name is Joe George. I'm filling in for Lauren Cox over the next 5 days. If you listen to our squad shows or maybe caught me on the Cubs postcast shows this year, you're a little familiar with me. But I'm hanging out with you guys for the next 5 days. Excited to be here. Thanks for Lauren for the opportunity to fill in and talk Bears with all of you. And thank you for making Locked On Bears your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. On today's show, we're going to talk about, are the Bears a legitimate playoff contender? What do the odds say? What does it look like for the Bears to get it? Who's in their way? Who's in their area of on the outside looking in that's a pretender versus what the Bears are right now? Ryan Poles makes one move at the deadline, followed up at the previous week of signing C.J. Gardner-Johnson. We'll go through that. We'll talk about the running back split, what that looks like going forward if D'Andre Swift to be alongside Kyle Monangai after his breakout rookie game against the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll through all of that on the show, but we'll start with this. Are the Bears a legitimate playoff contender in 2025? Lauren and I have joked on the squad shows a couple times that one of the goals for this season for us, for the Bears, was to at the end of the year see the in the hunt graphic come up and not kind of chuckle at it. That you see this team up there and like, okay, this team legitimately has a chance to make the playoffs. They need a couple things to go their way, but it's not you need 20 things to go their way like it feels like it has been in previous seasons. Even last year, they were up on the in the hunt graphics, for some reason later into the year than they should have been, even though they were on a 10-game losing streak. This year, it feels very different to me. And part of that is what we've seen in the 3 games that the Bears have won that they would not have won in the Matt Eberflus era or the Mark Trestman era or John Fox or any of those eras at this point. But the 1-point wins you got over Washington and Las Vegas, and then the win you got this last weekend against Cincinnati, it really made me feel like, okay, yes, the Bears are flawed, and we'll go through why it's going to be a challenge to make the playoffs a little bit because of their flaws. But because this team is winning these games in clutch situations and because their quarterback is putting them in situations to win these big games, I think my broad answer to this before we get into more of the why is yes. Yes, the Bears are a legitimate playoff contender this year. I don't think that this 5-3 record is going to fall apart, to a point where, man, remember when it was 5-3 and things were good and the season ends, you're 6-11 and the season's over and you're totally disappointed. There's no way in my mind that's the path that the Bears are headed down. I think they're headed towards being really competitive in a super talented, tough NFC in which to make the playoffs, you're going to have to go through a daunting schedule. So the first thing I want to go through here in this is what are the teams around you? So you got the Vikings, the Panthers, and the Bears all sitting there right now at either 5-4 or 4-4, with the Vikings being the 4-4 team. You got the Lions at 5-3. I think we all expect them to take off again at some point this season to win the North pretty handily, especially with the way the Packers have been playing, really up and down right now. And I think the Packers are still going to make the playoffs this year, unfortunately. But so really it comes down to that 7 seed. Like what's the path to being the 6 or 7 seed? The first one is this. So the Panthers, I don't think they're legitimate. The Vikings at this point, I have to say no. Small sample size with J.J. McCarthy, a ton of obviously weapons on offense, a great coach in Kevin O'Connell. But I would not put them in a legit category just yet until we see more of what J.J. McCarthy can do. So of the 3 teams that are at the top of the NFC on the outside looking in right now, the only team I think that is a legit playoff contender is the Bears. It makes it a little simpler that way. There's a bunch of different metrics that you can go through in websites, and they all have different formulas about how to, your percentage chances to make the playoff teams. And the one that I'm looking at right now, it's got the Bears at a 45% chance to make the playoffs. I think that's about accurate. And to me, if it's about 50-50, that makes you very legitimate in your chances to make the playoffs. The first thing they need to do, though, is take care of business this weekend against the Giants. If you don't do that, everything I feel like I just said and what I'm going to say in this first segment goes out the window. You got to beat the New York Giants this weekend, and not just beat them, but I think beat them handily. At least give me a 10-point win. No more of these close wins. Prove that this offense from week 1 to week 2 can continue to grow. And that's where I think, if you're asking why is this team there, it's because I believe that this offense is going to continue to grow. It's funny how during these post-game shows we've been doing is, in the moment, it never feels that great about Caleb Williams and the offense. And then you listen to the experts and you rewatch the game and it's like, okay, he is playing well, even though the numbers don't always bear that out. And this last game, to me, obviously he played at an elite level in a lot of ways. It's amazing some of the categories he put himself in, because he has those 20 receiving yards, as the only guy ever with 250 plus passing yards, 50 rushing yards, and 20 receiving yards. But I think this offense can replicate not this last game, but can replicate something similar to it. They can build off of the Bengals game and move forward. So that's why, to me, they're legitimate. It's because their offense. They can score. They're going to be able to score again. Now, to prove it, you're going to have to go out there and beat the teams like the Steelers, the Eagles, probably not the Eagles, but the Steelers, the 49ers. You're going to have to win a couple of these divisional games. So for the Bears to be a legit playoff contender, more than just what I think they're going to be, this is the path that I think they have to follow. You have to beat the New York Giants first and foremost, like I said. You have to beat Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that's been really up and down this season, had some good, had some really bad. Aaron Rodgers looks more like the Aaron Rodgers of old as of late, which is terrifying. But like the demons of these close games of the past, of Matt Eberflus we referenced, I think beating Aaron Rodgers this year kind of can alleviate some of the stress of being a Bears fan, even though he's not a Packer anymore. But getting that victory against Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers is really important. You have to split with the Green Bay Packers. So if you do that, that gives you 3 more wins right there. That puts me at 8 wins on the year. The next one, you have to rebound and get a win against the Minnesota Vikings. That puts you at 9. So the last one I think that you're going to have to win this year for the Bears to actually be a playoff team, as we now sit here halfway through the season, is the San Francisco 49ers game. That to me feels like a game where the entire season, the way this season's shaping out in the NFL, it might all come down to that game in terms of tiebreakers and where the 49ers are positioned and where the Bears are positioned. It just, when I'm looking at these teams and their schedules, I just see a collision course to which these two teams are going to be playing the second to last week of the season, and the loser of this game is going to say, wow, that was our chance to make the playoffs, and we just blew it. That's where I feel like they're going right now. So to be the other side of this, just to where if the Bears are not legit playoff contenders, my biggest concern about this team right now, honestly, is not the defense. We'll get through the trade they made. We'll talk about C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Jalen Johnson coming back, Kyler Gordon coming back at some point this season as well. The special teams is honestly the one thing that from this last game that has me worried more than anything, because we've seen good defense at times this year. You think back to the Dallas game, like you've seen good moments where they've come up clutch. Obviously, the turnover numbers are crazy. Yes, you got cooked by Joe Flacco at 41 years old or whatever he is these days. But the special teams unit is the one that specifically this weekend versus the Giants, I need to see a big time rebound performance from, because they are making it way too challenging on your defense. And also, Cairo Santos. They're not clearly, but it doesn't feel like, at least at this moment on Wednesday, that they're going to be making a change at the kicker position. That's discouraging to me. I feel like it's Jake Moody time. I think a lot of Bears fans feel like it's Jake Moody time, or honestly, you can even go in a different direction and really just bring guys in if you wanted to. But I'm concerned about what we're seeing from the special teams unit. And honestly, ultimately, if the Bears don't make the playoffs, I feel like the special teams unit, just the way this season's going, might be what we look back at and say, that's the reason why. So I think the answer is yes. You can let me know at Joe George Radio on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, wherever on social media. That's where you find me. Threads as well. Do you believe the Chicago Bears are a legitimate playoff contender? All right, we'll take our break here. When we get back, we'll talk about Ryan Poles, what he did not do at the deadline. I think it was a good day, not a not a great day, but he also didn't mortgage the future. So I think it was a solid day for Ryan Poles at the deadline. We'll get to that next year on Locked On Bears. Today's show is brought to you by BILT. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where BILT comes in. BILT is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through BILT, you can earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But BILT isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. BILT has made everyday life feel more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure you use our link so that way they know that we sent you. All right, so at the deadline, it's a pretty quiet day for Ryan Poles. He doesn't trade a second-round pick. He doesn't go all in for a pass rusher, which I know a lot of people wanted him to do, and I get both sides of the argument. Now, before we get into what they did do and what I want to go first, what they didn't do. I see this Quinnen Williams trade that the Dallas Cowboys made, and it leaves me scratching my head a little bit, a team that would fall into the pretender category of what we just talked about in the last segment. And I don't even know if they're a pretender. They're not a contender at all in any way, shape, or form. The Cowboys are for me. You give up a first-round pick in 2027 and a second-rounder in 2026, this upcoming draft, for a player that's really talented, but you're not really going anywhere. And that's a move that in the past, it feels like now, while steeper than the Montez Sweat trade, would have made me scratch my head a little bit for Ryan Poles to make. For example, like there are reports from Jordan Schultz that the Bears were interested in talking to the New York Jets about Jermaine Johnson. Apparently, the Jets wanted a second-round pick. That's a player who hasn't really produced, is coming off still kind of a big injury, and that feels like that would have been a huge risk to mortgage part of your future. And because Poles has done a good job with second-rounders for the most part, and invest that into a player that, what are they really going to bring to this roster? So they don't make the big splash, and I'm frankly, I'm okay with it. I just didn't think that, even though, yes, I believe this team's a legitimate contender for the playoffs, I never said the word Super Bowl. I never said the word NFC Championship game, because there's a reason for that. I don't think the Bears are in that category this year. And frankly, like, I don't really think that making a big splash covers up the flaws that are on your defensive line. These are offseason issues to me that have to be fixed. But you did have to replace Dio Dengbo, who's now done for this year with a torn Achilles, and we'll see what the rest of his career looks like. I mean, players bouncing back from that, it's challenging, and it's one of those moments where, you have to separate how you feel for the player, because that sucks, versus the reality. But it wasn't a good signing before the injury, and then the injury just makes it even worse. So you really get no impact from Dio, and now you have to go out there and make a replacement move. And again, I think it was the right move to not go for a big name, but instead they just bring in someone who's kind of a no-name for a lot of people. A guy that I had to look up how to say his last name. And honestly, I'm not so totally sure I'm saying it correctly. It's Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, and he is not someone that's played a lot for the Cleveland Browns this year. You look at his stats, very minimally involved in what they're doing. And I would have liked a little bit more. So this is where I don't want to talk out both sides of my mouth. I'm glad they didn't make a big move, but I would have liked them to trade for someone that has made an impact in the NFL this season. And to me, what this ultimately means is that Poles and Dennis Allen and Ben Johnson, they look at this roster and they say, okay, Montez Sweat has been playing much better of late. Like, if you look at the numbers, the pass rush rate, the win rate versus tackles, those are climbing over the last handful of games. He is playing much better. He's getting to the quarterback. He's making an impact on this game defensively, that because of him, Austin Booker, Demarcus Robinson, when you get him back, that the Bears apparently feel like they have the horses, and Joe will now come in here and just be another rotational piece into this defensive line. So it's not a big move. It's a necessary move to replace Dio, because that's pretty much what you just did. Like, you really replaced him with a guy who is impacting games for the Browns pretty much in the same way that Dio's impacting them for the Bears, which is not to a high level at all. So it's fine. And one thing I would have liked the Bears to do, though, to be honest with you, at the deadline is make a very similar trade for a cornerback. That's where I do feel like there was something missed at this deadline because while I have no expectations for this player, if you would have made a similar move for a corner, you can at least say he's probably better than the corners you're putting out the field as of right now that are like Deshaun Wright, whether or McLeod. Like maybe you can find some kind of improvement. Now you added C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and he had a good first game as a member of the Bears. I was impressed with what he did. Gets a sack. He's playing good coverage. Didn't play a ton in this first game. Not shocking. I think we'll see more and more of him over the next couple weeks. And Kyler Gordon, something we've talked about on the squad shows, if you've been checking them out, is maybe Kyler Gordon can play on the outside a little bit. And C.J. Gardner-Johnson can play that nickel position that he played in New Orleans for Dennis Allen that he's playing right now in Kyler Gordon's stead. And then, when Jalen Johnson comes back, you kind of shuffle the deck again, and you have different combinations of guys that you're playing, but we have to wait for the return of Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson. You don't really know when those things are going to be. Like, yeah, you could get Kyler Gordon back in a couple games here, or his window could be activated and it could be out for an extra 2 weeks, and Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon could both be returning around the same time in December, potentially. So I would have liked to see a move for a corner. I just think there was room to upgrade in that room in the moment at the deadline, even with another low-level player, and not to disrespect anyone, but a lower-level player in the NFL that could maybe just compete with Deshaun Wright for the next couple weeks and take him off the field for some of the snaps. Just add another body, because even then, I think they need another body. The Bears are still one injury away where you're in a bad spot again at corner, and you're not in a great spot right now. So that to me is a little bit of a disappointment that they didn't add some kind of cornerback help. So the C.J. Gardner-Johnson move was good. The next move, there is another move out there, and we'll see. There's reports that Asante Samuel Jr. has been visiting or is going to visit the Green Bay Packers. That's a player that I would really love to see Ryan Poles go out there and make a move on right now. Just another low risk, take a flyer on a player. The worst thing that happens is you come in, he's not good anymore, he's not up to speed, and you have to move on pretty quickly. But it feels like a player of that caliber who's been good in the NFL can come in here and be better than what you currently have in Deshaun Wright. You can use him on this roster, and you can help duct tape the cornerback room together. That's the other move that's really out there, I think, right now. And maybe we'll see some players get waived, some veteran players in the next 2 weeks. We do see that happen in the NFL of teams that are not for sure going to make the playoffs. They move on from veteran players so they can go and try to sign with a contender this year and try to make that roster and make an impact on that team. And so it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that the Bears can add to the cornerback room, but they've also, until Kyler Gordon got hurt and placed on injured reserve, they've also just been really patient this year. And again, going back to your addition on the defensive line, there hasn't been the urgency this regular season, to replace all these corners and these defensive linemen who are either not producing or just flat out not healthy, which just has been a little strange to me. We haven't seen a ton of tryouts and things like that be reported about what the Bears are actively trying to do. It's very similar to how it felt in training camp with the running back room of, no one's healthy. You're struggling to get guys on the field in training camp, and you're not really bringing in running back. And that's because clearly, and check for them in the W column, there was no reason to bring anyone in because you have two good running backs right now. You have D'Andre Swift, who's been playing some of the best football of his career in recent history, I would say, and Kyle Monangai has this breakout game. So maybe you didn't need to add to the running back room. And I don't firmly believe that. So if I was going to grade out the deadline for Ryan Poles, honestly, I give him a B+. Let's go with B. I'll give him a B for the deadline because it fills the need. You could have added more, but you also didn't go out there and make some ridiculous trade that's going to potentially blow up in your face in a couple years as a player slows down, having to repay them, having to get them a new contract. The big splash move comes this season. I think it's a good sign, whether it's Poles or Ben Johnson's influence, whatever it is, that even though you clearly made some mistakes this offseason in terms of addressing the defensive line and the pass rush position, that you didn't try to overcorrect in a market that was very, very pricey. And yeah, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of what the Colts did. I think that's awesome that they went out there and got Sauce Gardner. I think it's great for the Cowboys, like fans, that they went and made a big move. I think it's not going to do anything for them, but it's a fun move inside of itself. So I'm glad they didn't make any rash decisions today. And I'm not sure everyone's going to agree with me on that. I think a lot of people would have liked to see the Bears make a big splash. But it's better to me to be quiet than to make a move that's going to be a total disaster. And, not, like the Chase Claypool deal. That move was atrocious. It was not good basically from day one that they made it in the moment as the season played out. So I'm glad the Bears did not do that again this offseason. So Ryan Poles, progress, I would say. All right. We'll take our next break here when we get back. Let's talk about the running back split. What should that look like? We'll talk a little bit about James Odunze and the tweet. It feels like it's quieting down a little bit, even though the trade deadline's passed and he suggested the Bears trade his son. Obviously, it's not happening. But the Bears had, I think, a funny response into that as well. We'll get to that next year on Locked On Bears.
The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. We're all enjoying the NFL season so far, but the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride that hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you could even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps everything exciting, especially when your team is the one making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So go to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, so the Chicago Bears on Tuesday night tweeted selfless. And it was a video of Rome Odunze, a bunch of highlights of him this season, things he's been doing without the ball in his hands. I think it's a great tweet just to put out there. If you haven't seen it, which it has 11 million views at this point on Twitter, James Odunze, Rome's father, quote tweeted a tweet saying the Bears really need to trade Rome because he's not getting the ball enough, is essentially what he said. He put the pin emoji. See, I mean, he's got a lot of traction on it, to say the least. I mean, he's going back and forth with people. He's retweeting, target shares and targets on 2.5 seconds or less. And he's kind of indicating that Caleb Williams is the one finding Rome Odunze, and Rome Odunze is not being implemented and planned for in this offense by Ben Johnson. I don't think it's a huge deal. My concern is that it's still up there. I do, like Rome could have told them to take it down, but you can't control your parents. We all know that. But it's out there right now. Nothing to me to be concerned about right now, but it's definitely obviously been a topic of conversation on social media, is this tweet and if the Bears are using Rome Odunze enough. And he leads the Bears in targets this year. He's had a really good season. This last game obviously was not great. He only had 3 targets. Only 2 of them come from Caleb Williams, but he has 2 drops in this game. The first one to Cole Kmet, which sounds weird every time I say it. And then the one where it gets tipped at the line. The other 2 I want to point out is I think James Odunze did a good job of, just retweeting something that was defending Caleb Williams for that tip pass. So it's also clear it's not a Caleb versus Rome thing. It's a, why is the coach not using my son kind of a thing. It feels very peewee football-ish of what's going on, but it is what it is. But it kind of got me thinking about what we're seeing with targets and share of the football and this team with all this talented players. And we see the Kyle Monangai breakout game, 176 yards rushing. And we'll wait and see what the status is of D'Andre Swift for the game this weekend against the Giants. And, it got me more excited just thinking of what Ben Johnson did with Detroit. I was going back and looking through kind of the splits and the usage rate between D'Andre Swift and Jamal Williams. And, D'Andre Swift had one of his lowest career years in terms of just carries of the football. And, Jamal Williams had like 20 touchdowns or whatever it was that season. And yeah, they moved on from both those guys and they went and got, David Montgomery and they went and got Jahmyr Gibbs in the draft. So they clearly felt like they needed to upgrade. It was time to upgrade at the running back position. It's one of the reasons why I was shocked at the beginning of the season Swift made it onto the roster, but he's played really well as of late. And I think what we're going to see and what I want to see going forward when these guys are both fully healthy and on this team is a pretty close to 50-50 split. I mean, I want to see D'Andre Swift, I think, deserves still more of the carries because of that explosiveness that he brings to the Bears roster right now. And while Kyle Monangai was incredible in this game against the Bengals, like we didn't have like that big burst for 25, 50 yards. And it felt like there was opportunity, but he's just so good at running through contact and moving the pile all by himself that it felt like to me, this looks like a thunder and lightning kind of backfield that the Bears can have. And that's my hope from this game, really from this Bengals game, is it's not just for Monangai, but it's also for Colston Loveland, that kind of a wake-up call to whether it's Ben Johnson or Caleb Williams about, getting these guys more actively involved in the offense, specifically with Caleb and Loveland. But with Monangai and Swift, I think, going forward, I would love to see about a 60-40 split, not just carries, but overall touches. Like we saw Monangai be good in the screen game, but we know how good D'Andre Swift can be. Like when you think back to the Commanders game, that big breakaway run he had on a screen pass that was like 50-yard touchdown reception for him. So I think just to me, the simple answer is as close to a split as possible, but with a slight lean towards D'Andre Swift. The other reason why I think this game is important for the long-term part of the Bears season to kind of, full circle this conversation is as the Bears are trying to become a legitimate playoff contender, and not to, again, not talk both sides of my mouth, but, D'Andre Swift, I would expect to be less effective as the season goes on. We typically don't see, we all know this, typically running backs of that stature, that style, don't have as much success when it's 3 degrees outside with negative 30-degree wind chill at Soldier Field or at Lambeau. That, to me, is where you should get really excited about what you're seeing from Kyle Monangai. Just having like that bruising back that can punish you like David Montgomery used to do. Monangai's probably more bruising than Montgomery, it feels like, after just one game. But, we used to see like that advantage that he had, and even Forte had, just being able to put your shoulder down in the cold, make contact, hard guy to bring down. Like that's where I think as the season goes on, like while I want to be 60-40 D'Andre Swift at first, I do think there's a scenario in which as it gets a little bit colder and a little bit colder, that we'll see eventually Kyle Monangai continue to just get more and more involved in the offense. The biggest thing, I don't want it to go too far backwards. Like I know you got to get these guys in a rhythm, and you got to, if one's the hot hand, you ride the hot hand. If Swift is going, you don't just change it up to change it up because that's your game plan. Obviously, Ben Johnson's not going to do that, but I just don't want to see where it was, 2-3 weeks ago even. I just think we've seen enough from Kyle Monangai in just one game and other moments this season that shows you that he can be an impactful running back for the Bears this season and going forward. I'm not sure he's ever, a number one guy for the Bears. I know that sounds really strange to say after watching him rush for 176 yards, but it feels like he's locked in already at this point in his career, halfway through his first season in the NFL, can be locked in as a guy that is able to go out there as a number 2 running back at worst, be a goal line merchant, just be an extra weapon for this team. Because I go back to one of the 3rd and 1 plays, or I think it was the 3rd and 1, where when they show the replay, the Bengals defender meets Kyle Monangai in the hole behind the line of scrimmage, and Kyle Monangai just pushes him across for 2 yards to get the first down. I was so impressed with them. So, yeah, I mean, Kyle Monangai is a monster. I can't wait to see what he and potentially D'Andre Swift do against the New York Giants this weekend. We'll preview that game with Patricia from Locked On Giants. We'll do that on the Thursday episode of the show. So thank you again for hanging out with me today. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be with you here through Tuesday next week, as well. We'll have the post-game show, the squad show on Sunday. So thanks for listening. Remember, hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. as well anywhere your podcast, Apple and Spotify. Again, thank you for listening to Locked On Bears, your first listen of the day. The NFL season is here. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Twitter, social media platforms across the board at Joe George Radio. We'll talk to you Thursday. Enjoy your day. Peace.